well, you know, that's like just your opinion, man.
Well, hello, all of you kids and kiddies and adults and whoever else is watching. I welcome both of you. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. This is the Audio Opinion Show. My name is Brian Maddox. I am joined by my co-host, Andy Broughton, who is fresh back from touring and back in his rightful home. And COVID-free, thank you very much, having been tested probably 47 times. No extra charge for that. This is the Audio Opinion Show. The whole point of this show is for a bunch of audio people to get together and, you know, share our opinions about things because that's important. Said no one ever. So that's the whole kind of shtick of what we're doing here. We've got a couple new faces, which I'm glad to see. But it's, you know, we're mostly live show people, combinations of comms guys or fader pusher guys or you know, company owner guys or whatever. Michael, you just stuck your hand up. What's up?
Well, I kind of have a different opinion about the audio thing. I think it is probably the most important because if you have to struggle to hear somebody and struggle to understand, then you tend to lose interest faster and not get the whole message.
So your point is right, Michael, except that we don't debate whether audio is important because all of us think it's incredibly important because that's what we do for a living. What we do debate is in tiny little minutia of audio that most people don't care about. So anyway, thanks for joining us also, Michael. So we're going to start with a poll because that's what we always do. And we're going to start with the most important question. This is also how we practice polling. So I'm going to launch this poll. I have to read it because everybody on YouTube can't actually see it because reasons. So the question is, what's your favorite The Princess Bride quote, TPB quote? First, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Or is it unconceivable? Or is it RUOSs? I don't think they exist. Or is it whatever you wish? Or finally, the answer is really, Brian? Seriously? So these are the options. Vote early, vote often. I would play the theme from Jeopardy, but that would require me to fire up QLab, and I'm just not that ambitious. So how many folks do we got here?
Expired, one of the two, right?
Or something. Okay, I think we're getting close to a quorum here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit end and share the results. So the results are we have two winners. One is you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means, and or really, Brian, seriously. Okay, so the people who voted you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means are wrong because that's actually not a quote from The Princess Bride. None of these are quotes from The Princess Bride.
Ooh.
Yeah, this is a list of quotes that are almost from the Princess Bride.
That is 100% accurate. Ed Whillock, you win the Audio Opinion Show for the night. It's you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Inconceivable. ROUSs? I don't think they exist. As you wish. Those are the actual quotes, which is why the last one was really, Brian? Seriously?
Good one, Brian. Good one.
So that's now we know how the polling system works. Now we'll actually figure out what our topic is for today. So let's go ahead and launch that poll. And this is actually what our topic for the day is going to be. There's some tiny simple little things and some bigger things. So, and Mac is laughing.
Chose some of these.
Mac is laughing because he knows a couple of these came from a recent conversation on online forum. But so the first one is, what's your favorite type of battery to use? I know that seems really arcane, but do you use rechargeables? Are you like, I only use alkalines specifically for wireless and those kinds of things? Second one, is an audible indication of low battery on an IEM receiver a good idea? It's a very, very specific question that Andy Broughton is still looking for support for. Number three, what's your opinion on gain sharing, specifically gain sharing between a front of house and monitor console or between multiple consoles. For what do you think the next game-changing tech is going to be? And I'm thinking things like how the line array changed the entire way that we approached PA systems. And finally, it's a geeky network question. Dante versus AVB versus MADI versus anything else you really want to bring up. If you really want to talk about it. And, pluses, minuses, why you care, why you don't. So I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think that's everybody because I never did log in to get my own vote. So, okay. We have a clear winner, and I'm sorry to say, Andy Broughton, they did not pick your question.
Nobody
So,
cares. Where's the love?
I care deeply.
That's all right.
So tonight we're going to talk about audio networks, Dante versus AVB versus MADI versus anything else you want to throw in there. CobraNet, Ether Sound, I don't care. Make up your own thing.
Tin can with a string.
Tin can with a string. And
the original live wire.
Oh, there we go. As we often do, or as we usually do, I am going to turn to my good friend Andy Broughton and put him on the spot and make him at least begin our conversation. Talk to us about audio networking and what you think is important and which protocol you prefer.
Wow. Okay. Well, I end up using Dante more than any of the other ones. So I guess Dante seemed like the best solution for quite a while there, mostly because it just seemed to work. Yamaha was supporting it.
Why do you use Dante more than the rest?
Because I use a lot of Yamaha stuff. I've never been a big fan of Avid products, so I didn't really jump on the MADI bandwagon or Digico. I like Digico. Digico's fine, but I end up in front of the Yamaha more than anything else.
Dante uses a lot of MADI though too.
Sorry?
Studer Soundcraft is MADI also.
I haven't seen a Studer console ever. Soundcraft kind of died after they brought out the Spirit line and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. Yes, I know Soundcraft is out there, but you hardly ever see that stuff in my world anyway. So Dante made a lot of sense. Networkable. But then you start, as you go, and easier to connect, right? So a lot of these things are point to point, so you can't network them. Dante made it easy with their software, allowing you to do patching and different things like this, and it made a lot of sense. Not real excited about the latency that's inherent in the system. Timing supposedly can be a thing. This is what I'm hearing. Now nobody's really given me any hard numbers, but my understanding is that people are saying, L Acoustics, for example, and Avid, that AVB has better timing when you get down to microseconds of timing. So I don't know.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, but what do they mean by timing? Do they mean like jitter rate? Do they mean like clock consistency?
They're not saying, but for some reason, L Acoustics and Avid, who could probably choose any protocol they felt
and
Meyer. And Meyer have all chosen Milan, I guess it's called Milan, as opposed to some other protocol.
Yamaha
has gone away from Dante and gone to Twin Lane, their own protocol.
So this is the most important part for me from this entire conversation. Is it Twin Lane or is it Twin Lane?
Twin Lane.
Twin Lane.
And is it Milan or Milan or Milan?
It's Milan.
It's Milan.
Very clearly
just
Milan.
So I should refer to it from now on as Milan, and that sounds that sounds a little bit more important than AVB, which sounds very American and like geeky.
Very Samsung-y.
Right. We don't want that. No. Yeah, I mean, Neumann, this sounds expensive. Samson does not
Neumann
sound
like a character on Seinfeld.
Exactly. So I don't care how it's supposed to be pronounced. We're going with Neumann because it sounds more expensive. So now that I've set the standard for what the show is going to be, so Andy seems to lean towards, and mostly because he's used it a lot. Dante, do we have any?
Oh no, I don't lean towards it at all.
It's
just that's what's out there. If the
It's a
only
devil
thing
you
out there
know.
was Cobra in it, I still think it sucks, but I use it anyway. So I don't think Dante sucks. I just don't think it's that great. I think it could be better, and I think some new things that are coming out probably will be better. And I don't know that there's a perfect system because I don't really like ring networks.
What would you like better?
I guess I would like Dante if it was 100% reliable and
more stable.
Zero latency and things like that, I guess.
Well, it's never going to get to be zero latency because it's a network, so it's got inherent network latency.
Sure.
But it's also not the first. It's actually when Dante was invented, Telos had over 10,000 installations of Livewire, which is basically exactly the same thing as Dante, but it had a different user interface. Each device had a embedded web page, and you would open up the device and the web page would pop up, and there would be pull down menus for all the inputs and pull down menus for all the outputs, and you would just assign them on the device, not on a central controller. And they didn't have Brooklyn cards.
Yeah,
Was
actually,
Livewire less finicky than Dante can be?
I really couldn't say. It's been a while. I mean, since I've actually used it, but it was my introduction to networking. And when we first used it, actually on the same gig I'm on now, maybe 20 years ago, I didn't want to touch it. It was like, please, this is wanky shit that you bought off eBay. And
Did
Livewire
work over the public internet?
No. But by the second time I used it, I was completely sold. The fact that every source could be available at every destination just by pushing a button without running any more wire. I mean, we were working out of a corporate office building, and we had originally we'd run all this multi-cable under the floors. It was all raised computer floors. And, when we went on long hiatuses, you'd pull it all out, and it was a mess. And we said, why don't we just run half a dozen Cat 5s and call it a day? Get out, drop and go. If we move, leave it. We don't want to come back. And the routing thing just completely sold me. And then Dante came along and I think made it more usable. And certainly because of their, Yamaha's jumping in with both feet right at the beginning. And I'm also a big Yamaha user. That really made it attractive.
Yeah, I ran into, I got called in to help out a studio somewhere. I forgot where. They wanted to install a big phone bridge system to be able to take typical what a radio station would do, where they want to take a bunch of phone. And they had bought a Telos box to do that because that's something Telos does well. And all of the audio interface in it was Livewire. And this was relatively recently. This was in the last couple of years. And I had never heard of it. I started digging a little bit and realized it was, actually real deal stuff. The problem is it kind of only talks to itself until you get into an AES 67 bridge situation, and then you can bridge it to other things. And that I eventually got it to work, but it wasn't fun. But I'm glad you brought up Livewire because I'd completely forgotten about them. And I mean, Telos has a huge install base just in different kinds of things. Yeah, things that this group doesn't necessarily spend a lot of time doing. So we're all kind of like, Telos, who's that? Don't they do like phone interfaces? And Livewire, what is that? That sounds, but no, I mean, it's still very much an ongoing concern because if your network's already set up It does all the same stuff Dante does. It's the same sort of anywhere to anywhere, true network, all that kind of neat stuff.
And the same company offers the hardware. I mean, there's all the audio I/O. They make consoles. They make media distribution. It's a complete. I mean, it's a radio station thing, but it's a complete.
Right.
But they didn't license it to anybody else to put it in their equipment, except as a. They did.
You say they did? Wiejaczka?
PW, they said they did. No.
No, I don't think they did.
Yeah, and I think that's.
I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I've only seen like MADI converters to it, like in trucks. So if they did, Calric would have put cards in. You know, they would have made for it.
Which it's interesting because there's a lot of the conversation between AVB and Dante and like this exact conversation. A lot of it comes down to how the product was marketed and like aligned with all the other manufacturers. It reminds me of back in the olden days when, you know, T-Rexes ran around, when they wanted to make keyboards talk to each other and somebody, you know, and each company had their own little thing. And then somebody said, we need to make a thing that everything can talk to everything and just make a protocol that everything can talk to. And most of the manufacturers like fought it at first because they were like, we want you to buy all of our synthesizers and nobody else's synthesizers. But eventually this thing called MIDI became a thing that, well, if it doesn't have MIDI, it's not going to, and then all the keyboards could talk to each other. And here we are 4,700 years later, and MIDI is still around and still used for all kinds of things for the simple reason that it's on everything. It's not particularly great at a lot of stuff, but it's on everything. And Dante reminds me of that to a certain extent. It's like they've managed to get so many manufacturers to at least have cards with their chips in them or build it into their hardware already or whatever, that it just becomes this, you know, if I need to make a bunch of different manufacturers all talk to each other and I want a true network, it's not the only game in town because AVB is a game, but it's kind of the only relatively straightforward game in town.
I think the one thing I just want to finish up with was saying, people asking me why don't I like Dante? Why do I not think it's maybe the best thing? When it works great and it's super easy to use. When it doesn't work, I think the software sucks. I think they don't have anywhere near enough error logging or anywhere near enough information as to why your
Andy, I think we need
properly.
to dive down deeper into your feelings about that, because I'm not so sure it is exactly like it's such a regulated and closed system. It's only third parties that can make it bad.
No, because I believe that the error, like I said, they should have created an error protocol that allows all the machines to have similar.
I second, third, and fourth what Andy's saying. I want
they don't communicate what their problems are.
You
don't know why something's not connecting.
I want it to pop up. Hey, stupid! You forgot to connect this.
Right.
Well,
your IP's in the wrong.
It does give you
subnet.
errors,
Yeah.
but it has really lousy error descriptions.
Right. Exactly.
Terrible descriptions that give you no information as to why you're having trouble.
For me,
and you reconnect it, and all of a sudden it works. You're like,
it should pop up as red warnings off to the side. Hey, this is offline. This is offline, and this is offline because you didn't do this.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like that. If you go into Dante controller, there are on the transmitters and receivers, they'll show up as red, and then if you click on them, it'll show. Sometimes if it's in a wrong subnet, then it will show you.
For common errors, yes, things like wrong bit or wrong. We call not bit depth. The other one, clock. Wrong clock. Those are obvious ones. Subnets are obvious ones, but lots of things just don't work. Yeah, and they just don't give you any kind of error message that's useful. You restart the whole thing. You reconnect.
Give us an example, Andy. because I think it'll point to a specific piece of equipment rather than the actual Dante network itself.
I'll be the first one to admit it's normally user error.
Exactly.
I fully agree it's user error, but it should also give you an indication as to what you did wrong.
Yeah. That's what I
Well,
want.
that's why you have 6 hours of online classes to take, and you know all the answers then.
I've done them all, but then that's 4
Exactly.
years later, you've forgotten all that stuff.
You have to do it every week.
Good software leads you through these problems and helps you understand why you're getting.
So I challenge you with this then. Are there any of these examples of what's the protocols, but really they're standards that have software that do better error reporting than Dante Controller?
I don't know because I haven't used them enough. I don't know how AVB works.
None of those work.
Bolero does.
The problem is, and I think Dante handles it the best. The problem is that AVB and MADI and not Liveware, but AVB and MADI are open source almost. They let any manufacturers put it in their equipment. They don't require the manufacturers to put the entire protocol in their equipment, only what they want. And Dante is like, I like Dante because I like MacBooks. Mac only lets software on that they are sure is going to work right. Dante only lets you put their chip in your equipment unless they're sure it's going to work right. And that's why everybody says, oh, I wish there was a different thing than Dante Controller to you. And a few manufacturers have built it into their equipment with the help and permission of Dante. But pretty much, I don't know why they're complaining, because I think Dante Controller is so straightforward and simple. How much easier can it get?
You should try using it with an SSL console.
Well, and that
harder?
The SSL console, if you do routing at the through the console, it picks what Dante route you're going to take. I mean, it makes it and it works, but it may not be what you intended, what you thought you were doing.
Yeah, and the reason for that is the OEM, the manufacturers that have decided to spend money in keeping the firmwares up to date, not SSL or not Digico or not BSS Harman products, they tend to run into some of these issues that Andy is talking about. And they're usually pointed towards these third parties not wanting to spend the money on 2 times a year R&D when Audinate, sends an update. Every OEM has to spend money to rewrite their code to talk to that update. So, you'll see some gear that has like 2 or 3 year old firmware in it, SSL, BSS, and it becomes problematic in certain situations and uncertain.
There's the point. And there's the example. If you have firmware that doesn't match, it doesn't give you any kind of indication that, oh, we see that your firmware isn't up to date. You need to update this before I'm going to connect. Happens all the time with DVS. DVS is probably the one thing that I can say it gives the most trouble. And Ed, you were running into a problem just a little while ago with DVS, right? So it's one of these things where you update your firmware, you update this and you update that, and still it doesn't work. And it's just
one of the things that is really disturbing to me, and I never understood why they did it. If you change the name of one of your devices on your network, all your programming is gone and wiped out, and you have to redo it all from the beginning if you haven't.
Because they literally use the name to find the product.
Which is brilliant.
The entire programming for everything is wiped out because you change one, a little AVIO.
You can have a redundant system that way. If you call your two things the same name,
it'll transfer the patches over, Pete, if you do it in the right.
If you load them in, yes. But what if you didn't save it?
No, I mean, if you change the logical name of something after it's been
bad on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no, I've seen this happen on a system where they've changed the name of an AVIO 2-channel thing, and boop, blank, everything blanked.
Wow.
And you had to reload it in if you saved it.
I mean, this is a big reason why AVB never became. Sorry, Michael, I stepped on you.
I'm sorry. You really do have to think about it like a console, though. And every time you make changes, updates, whatever, you've got to save that thing just like you would a console.
Yep.
And those partial loads work great.
I'll be, I'll forget sometimes because I'm not thinking of it like a console enough.
But
All right,
I mean,
I'm going to make you stop talking because we have all walked on Ed like 47 times because he was starting to say. So Ed, Andy asked you basically a direct question, and then we all just like stomped on you. So what were you going to say?
Well, and Andy pointed out that I had some Dante issues with DVS a few months ago, and back to Pete's point, user error. It ended up being a network issue on the laptops. They were brand new laptops, and Dante Discovery wasn't checked off for private networks in the Windows firewall settings. So whether that should be default checked off or not, that's a different story, but it wasn't. And when I found it, I solved all my problems. So it wasn't per se Dante. It was an issue that
Third party.
Again, it was Windows.
I still feel like Dante Controller could give you a lot more information. I think it could discover a lot of these things and tell you, here's why you're not connecting, and here's what I can't get. I'm trying to do this thing, and I'm not getting this response back.
I also think it's possible to make a version of Dante Controller that can be edited offline.
Absolutely.
That would be a great. I think
it's actually been done, but not publicly.
You can open files offline.
Yeah,
it's an XML file. You can do it. It's just a pain in the butt.
So I'm going to jump in here only because
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Editing BBE code.
Yeah, it's
right.
No fun.
When I presented that, years ago to Audinate, they said, well, we can't emulate every device out there, and they just wouldn't buy the argument that you don't have to emulate every device out there. You only have to emulate boxes that have inputs and outputs, because that's all they address is inputs and outputs. And you just say, I want a 16 input, 8 output box. There it is, box X, and I'm going to call it Yamaha Rio 1608 upstage, and you build the show with that box. And then when you get on site, you plug in the actual device with that name, and it replaces that virtual device.
And why can't you name it ahead of time? And when it comes online, it goes, I don't see anything with that name. Would you like to call this thing that name?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the thing I want to call that name.
Yeah, you don't have to emulate anybody's product. All you have to do is make a box that can be any number of inputs and outputs that the user specifies that matches the box you're ultimately going to use.
And since Audinate makes the chips, they know, they're the only ones who make their own chips. They can just make emulators for each chip size that they make, whether it's the Ultimo or the Brooklyn 2 or whatever.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, yep, I have a device with a Brooklyn 2 chip, and it's going to be called, like you're saying, Mike. Yeah, great idea. That would make a whole lot of sense.
PM1D, that's how you emulated stuff. You made a fake one. When you didn't have the system to build, you said, this is the rack frame, and these are the cards that are in it, and you built the whole thing, and it showed up as virtual in the system. And then when you plugged into the real system, it came up and said, it just changed over and became the real box.
Yeah.
Why can't Audinate do that?
Well, and I could I could argue a couple of reasons why I still agree with you, Mac, but I can argue a couple of reasons why they're afraid to do it. One, the fundamental concept for Dante and for Audinate is that you're literally loading patch subscriptions directly into chips. Like that's where they're coming from. Like that's their mindset conceptually of what it is that they're doing. So when you say, oh, we want to be able to patch it, but the chip not be there, they're like, so then you're storing patching in controller. That's not like, it's just outside of the design. Which don't get me wrong, Mac, this is not me disagreeing with you. This is just me. I understand where their brain set is. Now I only because I've wanted to throw this in to support Andy's thing. So just by complete coincidence, yesterday and the day before, I did a job where I was literally brought into a studio to fix their Dante rig. Like that was the reason why I was brought in. And they had put a lot of Dante devices on another network that had NDI on it and a bunch of other different things. And, it had started out working, and then it had slowly devolved into chaos and nonsense and didn't want to work. And I had them buy a completely new set, like physically totally separate network. I said, yes, I can VLAN this and all that stuff, but you know what? There's nothing more VLAN-y than this switch is not attached to this switch, which means this information can never show up over here. But one of to go to your point, Andy, one of the issues that I had, they had half a dozen AVIOs and a QL1 and a couple other different things. And because it was living on another network that was doing other things, the person that had set it up had basically set up static IPs for all of the Dante devices, which is not fundamentally wrong. They had put them in 169.254.20. various things. And then they had put the subnet mask 255.255.255.0. So they had basically kind of used self-assigned address world, but had static IP'd it. It was a little bit strange, not wrong, just a little bit strange. But the problem that I ran into was, I put a bunch of stuff on the network, let everything self-assign, including my computer. And then I'm going in and I'm just trying to access these AVIOs to change them to DHCP so they'll self-assign. That's all I'm trying to do. And, I go in and I can see it's manual and it's set to this thing, and I hit auto and I hit apply and it goes, yeah, okay. And it goes gray and I go reboot and okay, yeah. And then it comes back up and I just get gray everything. No information. I'm not attached anymore. Just gray, nothing. And I'm just like, what happened? And long story very short, or short story very medium, because the third part of the subnet mask had been set to 255, my computer needed to be on .20, whatever I wanted. I needed to set it to a manual IP address that matched the AVIO, because my computer could see both of the last sets of numbers. I know there's a better word for that than that. I could see the AVIO, but because I wasn't technically, as far as the AVIO is concerned, in the same subnet, it wouldn't take my changes, which is a weird problem. But most frustrating was I got no feedback whatsoever from Dante Controller to give me any indication of, yeah, you can kind of see this, but if you try to change it, it's not going to take it. And it took me like 2 hours or something of head scratching. And is my switch, because I had to configure switches, like, is my switch wrong? Is my this, am I that? Till I finally figured out I have to put my computer static IP in the same 169.254.20 something, so that I'm in the same exact subnet as the AVIO. And then I can change it to auto, and then it will update, and then it will work. And it was ultimately, sorry for the long story, but it was the lack of any kind of real usable information. And in the process of a bunch of these devices they're in the same subnet as far as all the things I'm putting on new, because I'm in 255.255.00, 169.254. So all my devices see them, but their subnet is set to the wrong place. So they kind of are seen and kind of not. And so then they were all fighting because the QL1 was supposed to be the master, but as far as they were concerned, the master dropped off. So then they were jumping up to clock leader, and then another one was jumping up to clock leader, and I had like 5 clock leaders, and I like all like craziness, like madness happening, all because of this one strange little, the wrong octet was in the wrong place. And so that's where Dante gets frustrating. And it's
I just don't think this should never be a thing. I mean, you can plug a printer into an Apple network and it finds it. It's called Bonjour. It's a system that's already there. It's already, discovery is a thing that already exists on networks. So why did Dante not grab discovery and use it to find all the products and, tell you what you have and what you didn't set to the right IP and this sort of thing? It should be a lot smarter than it is.
Yes to all of that, but I'm wondering, because I don't have any actual experience with Milan, does it do it better?
Sorry,
It's
I
the
don't
same.
know.
It's basically Dante without the OEM Brooklyn 2 chip, I believe.
I mean, because
And better
time.
timing.
What's interesting is all of every loudspeaker manufacturer are ditching Dante for Milan. Every single one of them.
Oh, not just Dell Acoustics and Meyer?
Nope. D&B.
D&B?
They're
Whoa.
discontinuing the DS10 and gonna
there's
make
something
a
going on there.
DS50, I think.
Mm.
So, yep, there's something going on.
And it's not just
because I don't think they want to pay. I think they're tired of
that's what
paying
it
the
says,
licensing to
royalties.
Audinate.
I don't know.
You
You think
know,
Dell Acoustics is short on cash?
when you have however many hundreds of thousands of amplifiers, that gets very expensive.
Well, and one of the fundamental things about Audinate's chips is you can get a 4x4 chip, or you can get a 64x64 chip, or you can get a 512x512 chip. That's it. Like, these are your options. Like, there's nothing between 4 and 64, which just is crazy. And then there's nothing.
Brian, there's a 32 and a 16.
Not to the best of my knowledge. No, I don't think so.
They just firmware limited.
They firmware limit them. But the Brooklyn chip, it's the same Brooklyn 2 chip, and they just firmware for a device. If a device, like for instance, the QL1 has the same Brooklyn chip in it that the QL5 has in it. It's just that Yamaha firmware limits it to 32 by 32, but it's the same stupid chip. So if you want more IO in and out of this device than 4x4, you're immediately stepping up to a Brooklyn chip. That's what you're putting in your device. Like, if you just want to make a 6x6 box, you have to put a 64x64 chip in to do it.
Is that also the case with the MY16 Dante cards? Because those are 16 by 16.
Absolutely.
So those are really a Brooklyn chip?
Yep.
They're a Brooklyn 2 chip, yeah.
They were limited to 16 by 16 because of the MY slot.
Exactly.
Nothing to do with the Dante side. It's the
you pay for the
mini
licensing.
Agdike card that limited to 16 by 16.
Mm-hmm. But Brian, back to your
Mm-hmm.
thing about Dante controller and your example. So are you asking Dante controller to basically troubleshoot your network for you?
No, and a good question, and thank you very much for calling me out on that. But no, Andy put it a really good way, and that is, if Dante controller can discover a device based on what subnet my computer is in, but I'm not able to control it because it can discover it, but I'm not really in the same subnet, I would like it to tell me that.
Well, it will.
I
If you
can
double
I
click
can
on it. If you double click on it, it'll tell you what it's set to, and then you have to force your computer to what it's set to change it.
Well, yeah.
But you may have been in a weird situation.
Yeah, I was in a weird situation because as far as my computer was concerned, we were in the same subnet. As far as the AVIO was concerned, we were not, because the subnet masks were set differently. And I would just like controller to be able to say, and it basically does this, but I'd like it to, everything that's on a network that's Dante capable, it just comes up and says, I see all these things. These things are on these subnets, and so you can't even get to them. So, deal. These are on this subnet. They have, so you can see them, but you can't control them. It was very frustrating that it's sort of, and I mean, it was an arcane problem. It was a weird problem, but that's kind of that's kind of the downfall of Dante. So
I think you're actually blaming the network programming on Dante. It has nothing to do with Dante. On the other hand, the networking and all the devices and everything we plug into the network are all sufficiently complicated that you can't ask the equipment to give you answers on it. Someday, probably not too long from now, computers will be smart enough to tell us that stuff. When your computer has its own IT guy built inside,
Wouldn't that be amazing?
And
Right.
hey, little
Teeny
tiny
little-
IT guy. And he will tell you, you made a mistake again. You're an idiot.
If it's the paperclip guy, then I'm all in.
No. It's I would like the paperclip guy to come back, but be really, really, really smart.
Well,
Yeah,
he'll have
instead of
glasses indicating he's smarter.
right, because paperclip guy was just can I help you? And the answer was always no, because paperclip guy was an idiot and couldn't help you with anything.
Exactly.
Hang on a second. I would love to hear what Thomas has to say about this. I don't think we've heard much from Thomas about this specific subject. Have you dealt with Dante and some of these things very much, Thomas?
So for me, it's mostly just Dante. I also work with companies that just really use Yamaha consoles. What I've been thinking kind of this whole time is a reason why I think Dante maybe could be considered better is just the certification of it. I think it's a lot easier to just type into Google Dante certification, and then you have 1 through 3 of completely different need to know things. I'm not aware of a Milan or a MADI certification type thing like that. So I think that in itself is something that could set it apart from the others.
When did we have to become networking engineers on top of being audio engineers? That's
When
you started
I
using
know.
networks to route audio.
Ultimately, we will no longer be audio engineers. We'll only be networking.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
basically the case now.
Yeah, my label says audio plumber.
Yeah, for a reason.
Yeah, I like it.
But
Yeah, no, I mean we are definitely there. It's like if you don't have a good grasp, at least a good. I don't have a great, but at least a good grasp of networking. But Thomas's point, and thank you very much for Andy for shutting the rest of us up, and Thomas because. It's true. Like these other protocols are not really owned by a single owner. They're and consequently then having a vested interest in creating a training program, it doesn't really, it's not really a thing. And you can tell somebody, oh, you know nothing about Dante. Go here, spend the time, take the courses, do the tests. By the time you get to certification 3, that's pretty hardcore. Like that's like pretty deep stuff, and like go through all that, learn all that, and you're going to be 95% of the way towards, running, properly configuring, including switch configuration and everything else, a Dante system. There isn't really a similar thing for really any of the other protocols. You sort of kind of have to trip your way through it.
There are others that you should also do, though. Cisco, for instance, has very similar online training program that's general networking, not audio networking, but same rules.
Absolutely. Well, and that's, that's the other thing that we have only brushed on in passing, but Dante is totally designed to be a layer 3, completely layer 3 compatible protocol. And that by its very nature limits certain amounts of things, because that layer 3 protocol is really designed to trade data back and forth, not really designed for real-time audio. That was never its primary function when it was, and so Dante is going, okay, we're going to put clock information and we're going to prioritize and we're going to this and we're going to do that. And now we've gotten to a situation where you need to get a managed switch and you need to set those settings correctly so that the Dante is going to flow correctly, because the standard, local area network, layer 3 local area network, if there's other traffic on there, it's it doesn't care if it takes it an extra 15 milliseconds to load a web page. Like, and Dante's trying to do it all in real time. And because they're trying to kind of force a protocol that wasn't necessarily designed for it, they have to build in buffer time to make sure that everything passes the way it wants to, which leads to higher latency, which leads to people going, we're going to make our own thing like Milan or Twinlon or whatever. So it's catch-22 because it's great that you can just buy a bunch of switches, off the shelf. You can leverage the fact that Cisco has spent billions of dollars creating enterprise level switches that you can buy for $500 that are, or whatever, $1,500, but still, not $10,000.
But even Cisco has those $500 or $1,000 switches aren't necessarily managed. So you can't change things in it, which affect your system, like PTP clocking and IGMP on off, that sort of stuff, which is really, really very important.
Yeah, which goes to, we've all become network engineers. What I had to, I initially for this, because this studio I was working on is really pretty simple thing, a whole bunch of AVIO adapters, a QL1, a couple other little devices. And all I really wanted was, half a dozen 20-port unmanaged idiot switches. You can't buy unmanaged idiot switches anymore. They don't exist.
Even if they say Linksys on them?
Well, they say unmanaged switch, but the problem is they all have power save enabled and you can't turn it off. Right. And that's the one hard and fast rule with Dante is that will absolutely not work
with any audio network.
Well, it'll work for a little while. And then...
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
fails
the
intermittently.
problem is that you can use anything and you can use things that you shouldn't be using. Like if they had Dante certified switches, that would, like Yamaha does, they go, okay, why aren't you using a Yamaha?
SoundGrid works that way because SoundGrid is MAC address dependent and doesn't care about anything else. So it literally is just plug and play. So there are some out there that are like that, but they just haven't had adoption, Yeah,
the Allen Heath systems like that too.
Because of my lack of familiarity with AVB and Milan, I know that for a very long time, Milan had a hard time being accepted because it required AVB capable switches, which were much more expensive. But what was it about Milan that required those? What was the special thing that required?
The clock. So I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, and Pete, you might have been involved with this. We were R&Ding like beta, like alpha AVB for a certain manufacturer. And they were like at the forefront of like figuring it out. And it was touch and go for a while, but it all had to do with, like, at the time there were specific switches with specific firmware, with specific settings that would make it work. And it was all about the PTP clocking prioritization.
Right.
I think, right, Pete? And there might have been something else, but that originally
AVB requires AVB switches. AVB switches. I mean, it has to say that practically on it.
Right.
And so, I mean,
I've
seen manufacturers say, "Oh, we're going to put AVB in our system," and they put connectors on all their stuff. Riedel's one of them. They've got HDMI outputs on their panel saying, "Oh, well, when AVB comes, we're going to be able to plug a monitor into your intercom panel." Well, hasn't happened.
Yeah, and because AVB, they all fought over the standardization of it, and finally everyone just ditched it, including Meyer. Meyer was going to make AVB Galaxies that never showed up, basically.
Right.
And Samsung, I mean, Harman was going to do the same thing.
Right.
And, it is a very good sounding transport, just no one could decide on, like Motu's AVB isn't the same necessarily as Avid's AVB, and that's not the same necessarily as Apple's AVB, and that some of them do talk to each other, but it's not as open as or it's not as compatible as some of the other, which leads me to my opinion
what's
about
making that what's making that less compatible?
Because they can't decide on a standard. So clocking standards, PTP standards, chip standards. And that's why Audinate became so successful, is because they were like, no. We're going to fix this by making our own standard and forcing people to buy it. But now I think it's becoming, you have to buy the licensing as a manufacturer to have it.
Well, is L-Acoustic trying to lead the way with the standard then?
With Milan? I don't think so. Because, they're
with
all
AVB.
coming out with AVB or with Milan?
AVB.
I think the first manufacturer to jump on AVB was Meyer. They as soon as it was announced, they became
LCS, right? Stuff.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but I don't know that Meyer has the same marketplace right now that L-Acoustic does. I don't think they've got the same bite of the apple that L-Acoustic does.
Yeah, right now. But when they did this, they did
Meyer's in every theater
certainly
in the world.
in the digital world, because L-Acoustics never had anything like Dimitri, and still doesn't. Meyer was and probably still remains way ahead in the digital routing world.
I think, as I was sitting here like listening to us talk back and forth, and Pete, especially Wiejaczka, especially this last part that you were saying, it kind of, something clicked in my brain. And I think what we're really talking about when we talk about specifically about AVB versus Dante, because they're both doing very similar things. It's a network. It's a multi-point network that's doing similar things.
Right. Or Ravenna.
Or Ravenna? It reminds me of Apple versus PCs. And especially when you go back to the very beginning, and Apple's way was, we're going to do the software and the hardware, and we will control the horizontal, and we will control the vertical, and we will make the decisions of what it's going to do and what it's going to look like, and they'll always work together because we control both of these things. And the Windows world went, we're going to let our stuff work on hopefully a bunch of different kinds of hardware, and different people can decide what kind of hardware they're going to use, and then we'll make our operating system, work in. And so, Windows became much more flexible in that it could work with all kinds of different hardware and all, but with all that flexibility came complexity. With all that complexity came unreliability, incompatibility, things that, you need a driver for this and a driver for that. And if you think about it, that's exactly what Audinate's doing. Audinate's building the firmware, which is the software, and they're building the hardware. And so they control both of the things.
This is the thing they missed. They should have built.
And that's, they're conceptually, though, they're like, as long as we can control this and this, and they put a reasonably decent switch in between, these two things should talk. But of course, they're working on a layer 3 protocol that was, like I said, ultimately not really designed to do what they're doing. And the whole PC Mac thing, and we're not going down that road, but you could build a PC to do one specific task better than any Mac that's available, because you can optimize it and say, I'm going to put this graphics card and this thing and that thing and this memory chip and this thing, and it's going to be able to do this, and it'll be better, faster, stronger at this one task than any Apple product that there is. And somebody else can build another PC that does a completely different task that's not graphics oriented, that's maybe mining Bitcoin or something and doing something different. Bad example, but anyway.
But Brian, going back to the initial question of which one is better, for me, which one is better is just whatever gear you have to use. Like, what does the truck have? Does it have a Kelrec? Well, then I'm going to use Bluefin network for everything, and then probably convert to MADI somewhere. But or is it a Digico that runs on a OptiCore is MADI with control on it, and so it really just, for me, just comes down to what is the gear that are interfacing, and the less conversions I have to do, the better. Because I've had to do some pretty sizable gigs where you're converting just because you have to have that console or have to have that PA system, and it's a failure point to convert. And so if if you don't have to, don't.
Yeah, well, but and we're coming up on the hour, and I like to not bore both of our audience members too much, but that's a good. The bottom line is that all of these things exist for a reason. They're all good at certain things and best for certain situations. I mean, all of these engineering decisions, be it a networking protocol or a piece of hardware or a mixer or anything else, is somebody sitting down and balancing a whole bunch of compromises to come up with what's going to do this thing the best possible way. And sometimes
you mean the digital audio console. Oh,
right, exactly. Yeah, well, and and the thing is, you can have 5 smart engineers over here that are trying to create a thing, and 5 engineers over here, both equally smart, both groups that are trying to accomplish the same things. And at the end of the day, you end up with 2 completely different products because they've made different design decisions along the way, which is why, as frustrating as it is, we still have all of these different protocols, because certain ones work better for a speaker manufacturer, and certain ones work better for a console manufacturer, and certain ones work better for processing. And so we're kind of stuck still putting things together. And, at the end of the day, we as audio folks just have to learn a lot of all of them and embrace the madness, even though it would be super nice if there was just, one ring to rule them all, and we could just everything would plug into everything else. That being said,
use the one that works. Use the one that works.
Use the one that works. Well, and the other thing is, if it was too easy, everybody could do it, and we'd all be out of job. So, there is that. Anyway, I think we're going to call it a show for now. Andy Broughton, thank you for co-hosting, even though I talked over you pretty much the entire time.
Yeah, we only got to one person offering up their opinion on a topic. I mean, Andy presented the topic, and then we talked about it for the next hour.
Well, then very, very quickly, everybody has to vote. I vote Dante. Thomas?
Dante.
Mac?
I abstain.
I like this part of the show, though, is that we all have to go on record as what our preferred protocol is. I am also a Dante person because it's the devil I know. That's pretty much the reason.
Yeah, it's what we have at work.
I haven't decided yet because I don't think it's
our video switcher, our video router has 8 Brooklyn cards in it. So
Yamaha would like me to say twin lane.
Yeah, well, we don't have Yamaha consoles.
So anyway, with that, we've all decided that we absolutely positively vote for Dante because we don't know enough about the rest of them. So that just shows that, it doesn't mean it's better. It's just the devil we know. I want to thank all of my... Go ahead. No, go ahead, Ed.
I was going to say, I'll say Dante for now. And I do find it kind of interesting that through this whole conversation, we haven't brought up 2110. But
right, and the whole AES-67 standardization, and now we got Canadian jokes about Canadian bands. So this is definitely devolving.
We're still waiting for 2110 interfaces at work. So,
but actually, but your point is right, Ed. Which means we can probably roll this conversation right back into the hopper, and we'll end up talking about it again and go down a completely different rabbit trail. Anyway, in the meantime, I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us tonight, and for one of us having an opinion and the rest of us just basically batting the ball back and forth without anybody ever wanting to catch it. And we'll be back next week on Thursday evenings at 8:00 Eastern. If you're interested in joining the conversation, you can just send me an email. It'll be in the description underneath the YouTube video once I get around to writing it in there. And happy to have anybody that's interested in audio and has an opinion about something. And that's it. That's the qualifications. So thanks to everybody for coming, and we will see you next time. Andy Broughton, if you would be so kind as to roll that fabulous bean footage.
Yeah, well, that's like just your opinion, man.
Still live there, buddy.
I love that clip with